With that, I will begin to introduce our speaker. Everybody probably knows who he is, but I will tell you some of his accomplishments. There are so many actually too many to name, but Rick George is the CU Athletic Director, and he was named the Athletic Director in 2013, returning to Boulder, where he helped play a role in the school's first and only national championship in football some 23 years earlier. George came to Colorado from the Texas Rangers Baseball Club, where he was named Chief Operating Officer and also Business Operations. His list of achievements in his first 1,000 days as CU Athletic Director were very significant, but none more significant than the shepherding through of a $156 million athletic complex expansion from creation through fruition. George's support of Mike McIntyre's program allowed us to come back to bring the Buffaloes to national prominence once again. In addition to that, he also served as the president and CEO of the FOR, as in For Kids Foundation, a 501c3 organization that raised money for children's charities via golf-related events, where he led rebranding and organizational efforts that resulted in increases in charitable giving to the foundation. So Rick is also a wonderful Rotarian. So George was born on April 30, 1960 in Woodstock, Illinois, and he's graduated from Collinsville High School, where he lettered in football, basketball, and baseball. And he is married to former Nancy Green, and they have a couple of grown daughters. And I'd like to welcome Rick George.
Thank you, Sally, and great to be with all of you. I do have to say one thing that you failed to mention, Sally, that I was a junior Rotarian when I was in college. So I do have a bond with this group. So
well, you're again, welcome anytime.
Well, thanks for having me. And obviously, you know, we're in some unprecedented times with COVID and a lot of the things that are going on around our country. And college athletics is no different than all of you. We're heavily involved in them, and things change on an hourly and a daily and a weekly basis. And but one thing that stayed constant for us is our desire and our charge to make sure that we provide a world-class experience for our student athletes, and that hasn't changed. We've had student athletes on our campus. Dorothy, can you go on mute? Sorry, I can see that. So, so anyway, I'm used to this being on Zoom. I'm an expert at this now, but you know, they're challenging times, but you know, we've got a great team here, and really what I want to take you through today, and I talked about creating a world-class experience. What I want to take you through today, and then certainly I know the questions that I'm going to get are going to have nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but I think it's important that you all know what we're doing for our student athletes. And I think over the last 7 years, we've done a lot for our student athletes. I think what we're doing now moving forward with the creation of this program that I'm going to talk to you about, the whole athlete program, I think it's going to set us apart from any other institution in the country. And the whole athlete stands for wellness, health, and optimal life experience. For us, it's important that not only do we care for our student athletes while they're here, but in post-graduation, it's more than a scholarship. It's about a life experience that we think that we can provide. There's 4 aspects of this program that we think makes our student athletes life ready. It's physical health, psychological health, academic health, and career health. And this whole athlete is the umbrella that will undertake all of this. And I'm going to take you through those briefly. The first is physical health. You know, it's a huge part of our student athlete experience is to compete. And I think you would ask a student athlete and they'd tell you that the culmination of our experience is winning and competing and being able to do the things that they do. So it's important that we put them in the right position when they come to classes every day, when they come to our facility every day. Our sports medicine department encompasses our strength and conditioning and our nutrition department. Our nutrition department is probably the best in the country. We hired a young lady 6 years ago. We had no budget for this, or 5 years ago. It's now one of the best in the program. We devote about $1.5 million to nutrition each year for our student athletes. We provide on a regular basis 2 meals a day, a stipend for 3 meals in their stipend check that they get as part of their scholarship. And then we have a gold card that our student athletes are allowed to go around the community in 20 or 30 different restaurants, including some grocery stores, where they can do a meal swipe and get up to the amount of a dinner meal at local restaurants and grocery stores around there. We've got 3 full-time sports dietitians. We're currently doing a grab and go. We serve about 300 meals a day to our student athletes. They text in their order or call in their order, and then our dietitian, our sports dietitian team, they put that meal together. They pick it up curbside outside of our facility. So we've been providing for our student athletes every day since COVID has hit in March. We've been in operation, and our team's really done a great job of serving our student athletes. We also do a lot of other things in we've got our own sustainable snacks that we make, our jerkies, our butters. We've really got an incredible program that's providing the nutrients and the nutritional things that are important to our student athletes. As it relates to strength and conditioning and mental health, and what we're doing in the sports medicine area, our weight room and training rooms are state of the art. We've got 2 AlterG treadmills that we can take 80% of the weight off our student athletes if they've got a surgical injury. And if they're non-surgical, we've got a underwater treadmill in our facility that our student athletes have access to. We've got some of the best physicians in the country and medical team. 2 of our doctors, Dr. Saurabh Podar, is the chair of the Pac-12 Brain Trauma Task Force. He's done incredible work. He's actually on the most recent white paper about concussions and CTE and that. He's also been the chair of the NCAA Committee on Competitive Safeguards and Medical Aspects of Sport. Dr. Stephanie Chu is on the NCAA COVID-19 advisory panel. So we've got some of the best information that we can have as we inform our decisions moving forward for the health and safety of our student athletes. We've had to alter a lot of the things that we do in our sports medicine area because of COVID and doing things remotely, but we've done it really well. We're surveillance testing all of our student athletes on a weekly basis. Currently, we do symptom and temperature checks for all of our student athletes and staff that come into our facilities on a daily basis. These are, as I said before, pretty unprecedented times, but I think we've done a great job of kind of being nimble, and I think this program allows us to be nimble. We're also doing a great job from a psychological health side of the medical. We've got a telehealth system in place for our student athletes. We've also got a crisis hotline geared towards student athletes and our coaches if they have needs outside of office hours that we can provide for them. And I have to tell you, when I got here 7 years ago, we had 1 person in our mental health department. We now have 3 clinical psychologists that work just for student athletes, and we've also got 2 or 3 other staff members in there. We provide incredible programming, and one thing that I've learned, and we really made an effort 3 years ago to change what we're doing in the area of psychological health performance. And over the course of a student athlete's career, we will see 75% of our student athletes in our psychological health performance department. It's an area that is really important for us. We've done an incredible job of keeping them engaged during this time. And, we all know the COVID and the impact that it's having. But the impact that mental health is having on our young people is significant. And the people that we've got in place are doing a great job. Every Monday we have what we call Mental Lift Mondays, and then we have Mental Training Thursdays. And on Monday with the mental health, there's one topic. It could be about the power of self-talk or gratitude. And then on Thursday, we bring out some educational things and some learning things for our student athletes. We've been doing this each Monday throughout the course of the year, but it's been really important that we do that during this time. We're setting up telehealth appointments for our student athletes, so they have access to our clinicians on a daily basis. So I feel really good about that. We also created a group of student athletes called the Boulder Buffs, which is a group of student athletes that are peer advocates. We've trained them on mental health. So if a student athlete doesn't feel comfortable going to a coach or a staff member, they can certainly go to someone of their peers to help them navigate the issues that they're having. And again, we've done a really good job here. We want to try to end the stigma surrounding mental health, and our slogan is, "It's okay to not be okay." And we want our student athletes to be able to have the resources that they need. The next thing, a prong that's important for this whole athlete program is what we're doing academically. We've never been better academically in our history. Since 1996, we've had 13 semesters over a 2.9 GPA for all of our student athletes. And this is our 12th consecutive semester that we've had. We had our best spring semester in our history. Our cumulative GPA was 3.491. All of our sports teams had a GPA over a 3.0, which is the first time in our history. And we'll have to put an asterisk next to that because a lot of the courses were pass-fail, but it's still a great victory for our student athletes. And Chris Livingston and her team had to adapt quickly, because when we started learning remotely, we had to do our tutor sessions and our academic coordinating sessions virtually with our student athletes. And I had a major concern when this happened in March that we wouldn't finish well and we'd have eligibility issues. But I just looked at our first session's summer school grades, and they were the best that we've ever had. So we figured out how to take this environment that we've been put into to be able to do things differently, and it's worked. And I feel really good about what we're doing from a student athlete perspective in academics. The next part of this program is what we're doing from a career development piece. And the career health is really important. A couple of years ago, I had 3 or 4 of our student athletes from different sports come to me and say, "I can't find a job." And so I said, "Why can't you find a job?" "Well, I have no practical experience, or the major that I have maybe doesn't kind of fit what I want to do." And so I went to our academic counselors and said, what are you guys focused on? And it was eligibility, and it was GPA, graduation, those things. And nobody was really focused on career health. And so we quickly pivoted and we put the career component on here. We work with a local group, they're called NX Athletes, and we call it BuffX. And all of our student athletes now can put their profile on a website. We have companies that have their profile on the website, so they can look at our student athletes. Our student athletes do a mock interview, they create their own profile on their page, their own video that they want to see. And it's been really helpful for us to connect. We have this thing called Buffs Go Pro, where our student athletes, we bring companies into our facility over lunch, and our student athletes can meet with the Googles and the Balls and the Aero electronics and all the others. And that's worked really well for our student athletes. We're now providing internships for almost every student athlete that requests one. So we're giving them that practical experience. And then we're also helping them prepare for the day when they're going to interview. And this is going to be important for us down the road, because we want to be able to talk to our recruits about what we're doing in these areas. The last thing that I want to mention on this is that the most important thing that we're doing here that really makes this a unique program is what we're doing from the research standpoint. Teresa Hernandez, who's a doctor of arts and sciences and neuropsychology over in arts and sciences, this was really her concept that she came up with, and she brought it to me because we've been working with them for years. And they're going to do the research behind all of this. We've partnered with Kitman Labs. We're creating a dashboard and an app that all of these components will go into. All of our, medical issues that our student athletes have, and all of their strength and conditioning results will all go into this database that they'll be able to provide some research. We're doing research now on concussions, sleep study, mental health of our student athletes, both past and present, so we can do some comparables. And these things are going to really help us down the road with our coaches and our staff on how we will be able to use this in recruiting when we're in a living room talking to parents of a young lady or son, and being able to help them understand what we're doing at Colorado and where this can take them, because I think that's going to be important. It'll also give us the ability to hopefully get a 2 or 3% advantage in a competition for us as we analyze this data and see what it does for us. So we're excited about this program. We think it's going to, again, set us apart from other institutions. I think this is kind of a bigger version of what the old life skills program was. But we think it's really going to help us stay focused on what our role is here. And our role, and I tell our staff all the time, our role is we come into work every day to support and serve our student athletes and to make sure that we create a world-class experience for them. I believe this program is going to allow us to do that. These are really, really difficult, challenging times for us right now. And I know it is for all of you. And it's been pretty incredible for us, because we don't make any of our decisions, these days. You've got, the federal government, you've got the state, you've got the county, you've got the campus, you've got the conference, and then you've got, athletics. And so, when we make decisions, on certain things, it's challenging for us, because what decisions we make can be overturned just by different guidelines that are put out in different areas. And so we've tried to stay nimble. From day one, we've communicated with our student athletes and their families, and I think that's been really important. Last night at 5 o'clock, we had the doctors that I mentioned a little bit ago, and we're going to do this every week. That our parents can ask questions of our medical, because I'm not a medical expert, but I'm putting our medical experts on there because I want our families and our parents to know that we're looking out for the best interests of their sons and daughters. And, I think last night was really well received. I know we did it with our conference with all parents across the conference 3 weeks ago. And we're doing that now with our parents once a week. Every communication that we've had to our student athletes, not every, but most all of them, we've copied their parents on, because we know their parents are an important part of what they're doing. And we've told our student athletes from day one, we've told our parents, if your son it's your choice if your son or daughter wants to come back to Boulder. If they want to learn remotely, they can stay home, they can do it there. And it's your choice. It's a family decision on whether you want your son and daughter back in Boulder. And as I said, we had 100 student athletes that never left when COVID hit in March. We've got about 200 in town right now. They've been in our facilities since June 7th. And so they want to compete. They want to learn. They want to go to classes. They want to be in Boulder. We'll see how this goes as we move forward. But, what we're providing for our student athletes, and I think it's important for you to know as a community that they're forefront of all of our decisions, and their health and safety is paramount. And so with that, I'm going to stop, because I know I think I'm a little under the time. So that'll be more time for questions, because I know a lot of the things that I talked about in the whole athlete, you may not want to have questions about, but really want to answer your questions. So however, Michael, you want to do that, or Sally, just.
Sure, I'll take care of that. And there actually are some really good questions here. And many of them are directly related to what you've said, and some, of course, as you mentioned, about other things. So the very first question is John and Lenakotki. Go ahead.
Rick, this is John Kotke, and I first of all want to thank you for being with us today. Just in the early part of your presentation, you were talking about the nutritionists, and my thought was, as somebody who absolutely loves a burger and fries, if one of your student athletes orders a burger and fries from your nutritionist, do they allow that to happen?
As a matter of fact, one of the most, so we all, while we, in our Crawford Cub is where our training, where we have our fueling stations and that. We also have an area open for the public, and we serve burgers out of there and that. And the gold card that we give our student athletes can swipe there as well. So the most prominent thing that they order is burgers and fries.
Okay.
So,
all right.
So they still get that. But she does a good job of making sure all the other things that we give them a wide variety of choices when they come in.
Good, thank you.
But the other thing that we do, and I think it's important for you all to know, is most of the food that we get is from the state of Colorado. We try to keep everything in our state, the things that we order, and we try to make it Colorado branded stuff that we utilize in our facility.
Great, thank you very much. And we have another nutrition related question from Gordon Gam. Gordon, would you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, do you recommend any vitamins for your student athletes?
It's interesting that you mentioned that. That was something that came on our call last night. And we do, yes. But, there was really more discussion last night on our call with our doctors. And I wasn't on the call at that point because I had to get off to do another call. But they talked about, getting zinc and other things that would help, boost the immunity systems of our student athletes. And so that's something that as most of our student athletes start coming back, that we'll look very closely at, particularly during this pandemic. Great question.
Great, thank you. And Bill Anderson, would you mind unmuting yourself? You're next.
Rick, thanks for joining us today. This is a fascinating discussion. A question that I had was, in a normal year, college football obviously generates a great deal of revenue for schools. Coaches make millions. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about student athletes earning income from college sports.
Well, look, we are college sports, so we're not a pay for play. We're not we don't want our student athletes to be employees. If you look at what we're doing for our student athletes today, and a lot of the things that we've done over the last 5-7 years, they've got unlimited meals. We pay them full cost of attendance, which is over their scholarship, that covers any of the expenses to and from campus. We're providing them mental health support, academic support, nutrition. The value of a scholarship is well above the $60,000 that it is for out of state. It's more somewhere between $150,000 and $200,000 per student athlete, and if you calculate that, that's probably the top 10 or 15%, of household incomes around the country. And so, we are doing a lot for our student athletes to provide for them. And then the next thing that's coming, and I've been serving on a national committee, 2 national committees on this, is the name, image, and likeness. And I'm very supportive of a student athlete being able to monetize their name, image, and likeness. If a student athlete becomes a YouTube influencer or they've got a work product that they create, they should be able to make money off of that. And we're very supportive of that. I think the NCAA is, working with the federal government and, looking at, we will make our final recommendations in the coming weeks, probably in October. And then come January, there will be a vote on what name, image, and likeness will look like, and in all likelihood will be implemented in August of 2021. So, again, I'm not in favor of paying student athletes. We provide an incredible amount for our student athletes, and again, the name, image, and likeness is the next piece of that.
Great, thank you, Rick. Doug Rutherford, go ahead.
Hey, Rick, thanks for joining Rotary once again. Always appreciate you giving a state of the program. I did, as a season ticket holder, I did see the email that came out earlier this week, so appreciate all the hard work that went into deciding the wording on that. I thought it came out strong. Excited about the season. Curious, with the decision for the Pac-12, does that decision have to be, do all the teams have to be on board when you're going forward with that? And maybe a follow-up question, what was the hardest part in figuring that out with all the unknowns that are still ahead of us?
Yeah, and look, I mean, again, things could change next week, right? And you know, I don't know, 3 months ago or 4 months ago, we thought we'd still be, discussing, do we play, can we play, how do we play, what's the most healthy and safe way for us to play any sport in the fall. And given, the things that are out there and what we've tried to do as a conference and particularly as an institution, we've tried to put ourselves in the best position that with all of the unknowns and with all of the information that we have from health and safety, how do we compete and how do we host contests based on the medical information? And a lot of things are going to change. The capacity, if we do have fans in our stadium, if we play in our stadium, we've got protocols in place. We've hired outside groups to help us with social distancing that can help us understand that. We've been working with the CDPHE. We've been working with local Boulder County groups to make sure that we're communicating with them what our protocols are and what we're doing and to give them some comfort, that we've got a plan in place and we're looking at all these different factors that they're looking at. And a lot of what we're doing is based on the guidance that we're getting from the state and from Boulder County on what we can or cannot do. And so we're following the same thing everybody else is in our community and, wearing masks. And I did show my mask earlier, but I'm in my office by myself, so I don't have to wear it. But we're trying to practice. We're trying to be part of the solution. We've told our student athletes, and sometimes, they're young people and they don't put on their mask when they should. We're telling them, you've got to set an example. And our coaches and our staff have to set an example. And so, there's been a lot of discussions in our conference rooms or Zoom calls with our ADs and look, all of us have different situations. I think the LA schools are further behind than we are, obviously. And I think, maybe even the Arizona schools. And so we're looking at, how do we do this when some aren't as advanced as others? And again, those are discussions that are ongoing. And all we're trying to do at Colorado is we're trying to put ourselves in the best position that if we're given the go sign that we're ready to go and we're doing it in accordance with our state and county guidelines that have been put in front of us. Hope that answered your question, Doug.
It did. Appreciate it. Go Buffs.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and there's a question in the chat that I'm just going to summarize here, very similar, just about a lot of efforts, but is it best to just cancel the schedules to protect 100% the students and the fans? What are your thoughts?
Look, again, we're having those discussions. We had those discussions this morning for an hour and a half, and those will be ongoing discussions. And, again, we're going to have a plan in place if they allow us to host games in our stadium. We're going to have a plan in place that will be approved by people above my pay grade. But we're working on all those things, and we don't have all the answers, but we're getting a lot of answers, and we're taking a lot of guidance from our own medical people. We've got an incredible group of doctors in our conference, from Stanford to Oregon State to LA, and that we're working with. Some of our CEOs, and when I say CEOs, our presidents and chancellors have medical backgrounds. So we're having those kind of discussions constantly. We meet 3 times as ADs with our conference, and once or twice a week our doctors are on those calls as well. So it's ongoing discussions, and again, we're going to do what the medical advice is, and they're going to have a large say in how we move forward.
Great, thank you so much. Mayor Glustrom, you have a question?
I do, thank you. And thanks for speaking to our club, Rick.
Yes, sir.
This is a bit of a post-COVID question. It's long been the case that some universities commit extraordinary resources to headline sports and have dominated on the field. It seems like that's only become more pronounced in recent years. In the Pac-12, the University of Oregon with Nike has been a bit a part of that inner circle, but most schools cannot sustain on that level. Personally, I can't agree with devoting that much of a university's resources to being competitive at the highest level in football and basketball. But the question is, what's the way forward for CU given this harsh reality?
Well, look, I think the first thing that I would say is we're an auxiliary of the university. So we get the majority of our funds from areas outside of the institutional support. Most of the institutional support that we get is from the chancellor's office and what they provide us. And that's really geared towards our Olympic sport scholarships and our female athletes scholarships. And so we generate most of our revenue through ticket sales, through fundraising, and from conference distribution, which is our TV contracts. So we provide most of our financial resources to be able to do the things that we do. And so I feel really good about that. I think the model that we have in place, we balanced our budget every year in athletics. And we've done it because we're starting to have some success in our sports and men's basketball and football. They generate most of the revenue of those two sports. And then we've had outside events like concerts and other things that supplement what we're doing. We've been creative there. So our path moving forward, we can compete with Michigan's, we can compete with Oregon's and others that have maybe a little more resources than we do. But I think we've got everything we need to win championships and be successful. And again, we pay for all of our scholarships. You know, we pay the full boat for all of those scholarships. So that's what we're giving back. We pay taxes on some of our events that we have, that we host. As part of that, we pay for our own utilities, unlike most buildings on campus. So, you know, we're paying our way forward.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. James Kearney, you have a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. My first question, actually I have two questions. Is the focus on the mental health issue unique to CU? And is the background on identifying the need for mental health by athletes greatly different than academic student needs?
So what I would say is I don't think it's unique to us. I think, Mr. Kearney, what we've done is we put a real focus on this because this is an area that's near and dear to my heart and something that I think is really important for our student athletes. And so we made a commitment that we were going to invest in this because when 75% of our student athletes see a mental health practitioner during their time here, that tells me that we need to provide the support for our student athletes that they need. And certainly, you know, a student has the same stresses that our student athletes do. You know, I think one of the differences is our student athletes are competing on a national stage and you know, the social media today has been really challenging on young people. I mean, they can come off the field playing a game and look on Twitter or some of the other mediums and be criticized about how they played. And, you know, and some of that stuff can be really ugly and it's really tough on young people. And so, again, I don't know that we're a lot different than student athletes. I think we just have some added stressors because, you know, they're trying to compete at a high level and sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, sometimes they fail and sometimes they pass. And, you know, there's just a lot of stress that goes along with that. So we've just been mindful that it's just another way that we can create this world-class experience for our student athletes. And I think it's important that we've invested in that area, just like we did nutrition, because we think that's an important for our student athletes, doing sleep studies as well to help them and help us understand, what they're going through. So again, the mental health piece, I don't think it's unique to Colorado. I just think we put an incredible emphasis on it.
Thank you. For what it's worth, I think it's admirable.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. I just want to paraphrase a question, Rick, from the chat. The Colorado High School Athletic Association has delayed high school football until March, and some players are leaving state to play as they don't, so they don't get overlooked for college. Will that affect your recruiting?
Well, look, I mean, if you think about this, and so, looking at the spring sports, and we already made a precedent because we allowed those spring sports, and again, I was on the NCAA council when we voted on this, we allowed those student athletes to get that year back. And so we're paying for that, and it's on top of the normal scholarships. But moving forward, will the NCAA do that? And this recruiting is going to be really challenging. So let's just say that, and again, this is just a hypothetical, but if we don't play any sports this whole year, academic year, so now what do you do with all of the seniors that would have graduated that want another year? You've got limitations in scholarships for all of these sports. And so what happens to the junior and senior in high school that wants to move forward and get a scholarship, but you might not have any scholarships or limited scholarships? So I mean, there's so many, I don't want to say unintended consequences, but there's so many consequences that you have to think about as you're navigating this, because it does impact not just the college student athletes, but it's the high school student athletes that are coming up. And are there going to be as many opportunities available? We don't know that yet. And so again, that's why, people are saying, well, why don't you just cancel everything? Well, because there's a lot of things that you have to consider as you're looking to what moves ahead. And again, health and safety is going to make the decision at the end of the day. But we got to be thinking about the other consequences of what happens. And it's not just college athletics.
Yeah, thank you very much. Dr. Gary Kahn has a question. Gary, would you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I was wondering, since you are doing so much testing of your student athletes for COVID, what percentage of those that you're testing are positive, and how many athletes have actually tested positive? And then has this affected any of your programs so far?
No, and I won't get into the numbers because I don't think that's appropriate for me to do at this point. But I would say it's very low. Again, we test all of our student athletes when they came back in town. Every student athlete had to quarantine for 14 days. If we do contact tracing, we do it in concert with our public health officials in Boulder. I know Miguel Rueda, who oversees our sports medicine areas, he meets with our Boulder County Health Group on Fridays. So they have discussions. So we're in communication with them quite often on what we're doing. But, I feel really good about what we're doing in our facilities and how we test. We actually, our BioFrontiers department on campus, and you may have read about that, what they're doing with the saliva test. And I took a COVID test on Monday, and then I took the saliva test yesterday, and I know the results of those already. And I think that could be a game changer for a lot of us as they develop that test. And I'm trying to look for the name of that test, but I know I got something yesterday, and I went down and did the test because I wanted to see what our student athletes were going to experience on that. And so we're going to try to test as often as we can. I think it's prudent for us to do that. We're going to continue to contact TACE. We're going to continue to communicate with our campus and our local health officials as we move forward with all this.
Great, thank you very much. And Rick, we've got about 5 or 6 more minutes. Are you still okay with that?
I'm great.
Okay, great. We got you under the spotlight, you know. I wanna
That's
make
okay.
sure-
I love it. Look, I want to be candid with all of you, and you're an important part of our community, and having these questions is important that we can provide some answers.
Wonderful, great. Well, we're going to go to TC North. Dr. TC North, would you mind unmuting yourself and asking your question?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And Rick, thank you so much for the evolution of sports psych and mental health. What I want to share with you, and mostly with the other Rotarians, is CU's been doing this for a very long time. And I was the outside consultant in both psychotherapy and sports psychology for 12 years back around the Coach Mack era. And so it goes way back there. So I just wanted everybody to know how long you've actually been paying attention to these issues. It's not something you've just started.
Right.
And I just want to thank you for the incredible evolution of it.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And yes, it has been around. And what we've done is we've just, tried to put more of an emphasis because we know how important it is to young people. And particularly with the invention of cell phones and smartphones and, everything's real time. And so it's been important for us to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Bill Meyer, you've got the next question. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Rick, for being with us today. I think we all know that there's going to be a new normal when the pandemic ends. What do you see the new normal being like for CU athletics when the pandemic ends, particularly given the moves towards social justice, the image and likeness issues that you just talked about? What's the new normal going to look like?
Well, the new normal, I mean, and I told our staff this, probably the second or third week when we knew this was going to be prolonged. I said, we need to be thinking about what are we going to learn from this experience that we're going to apply to make us better moving forward. And I really believe that we're going to be better on the back end of this than we currently are. Because we've learned a lot. For us to be able to do the things that we've done academically, remotely, to be able to provide for our student athletes from a nutrition standpoint, from people being in our facilities and working. I mean, we're allowed up to 50% maximum of staff in the facility, and we probably got 25%, but we're operating really well. So I think we're going to probably see us doing more things remotely. It may make us more efficient. I think it'll make us more efficient and more effective in our communications and our strategies. And name, image, and likeness. I mean, there's going to be a lot of work that's going to be done. I think sports gambling coming to the state also provides a little bit more on our plate. We created a task force for social justice that we've got 8 student athletes and 8 staff members that are on that are going to. We just did a climate survey for all of our student athletes and our staff that we're in process of getting those results back. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take, and again, I've challenged our staff on this, I've challenged our coaches, is how do we do this moving forward? Because it's going to be different. There are going to be new normals. How do we create a better experience in our football stadium, in our event center, based on what we're learning from our studies that we've done with KPMG and Populous as it relates to density and as it relates to how we're going to serve food and how we're going to go ticketless and different things like that I think are going to make us a lot better. So the new normal, I don't know exactly what it is today, but I can tell you that every day we're keeping those notes and we're talking about what that will look like. And it really depends on, when we get this vaccine, what does that mean? Will it change the practices of the way we do our business? The answer is probably yes. I'll give you one example, like nutrition. When we first started doing this grab and go, they were coming up to our facility, and then we did it curbside, and then we evolved to text your order in. We'll tell you what time to pick it up. You come down there. They don't even come into the building. Now, we got to figure out how we balance that with human interaction, because we know our student athletes need that face-to-face. And so I said that in my executive team meeting right before this call was, we're going to start having more face-to-face contact with our student athletes. So how do we balance that with the remote piece? And, all of our student athletes come back and we usually have a welcome back picnic. We're probably not going to have them all in person. So we're going to do a lot of it remotely. And what does that look like? So we're kind of building the new playbook as we move forward on a daily basis. And we're trying to be as nimble as we can. I think at the end of the day, the playbook that we have next August 7th is going to be very different than it is today. Today, we've just been kind of holding on to ourselves to make sure it doesn't get away from us. And you know, every day there's a different nuance and a different thing that happens that makes us go in a different direction, and we're learning from that. But that playbook's being developed as we go, and I'm hopeful that by late spring that there'll be some more clarity to where we are and what that new normal looks like.
Thank you very much. We have lots of questions, but we only have a little bit of time. So the last one is going to go to our incoming President-elect Chad Stam. Chad?
Rick, thanks for joining us today. I was wondering if you could comment on the transfer portal and kind of how it's impacted college football and maybe what that might look like in the future.
Yeah, and again, I was on that working group, the transfer working group, so I guess I'm one of those responsible for that. But actually, it's gone really well. I think if you look at it publicly, everybody looks at it and says, "Oh, there's so many people now in the transfer portal, and you know this has gotten out of control." It really hasn't. You know, what it's done is what we didn't know before the transfer portal was how many people were actually transferring. And we knew who was transferring, but how many people were actually out there wanting to transfer? What we did is we gave the student athletes a choice that if you're not happy here, you can go into the portal. Once you go into the portal, we'll honor your scholarship until the end of that academic year, and then you can choose to go wherever you want. So it really was a student athlete friendly thing that we did because the students wanted this. They wanted to be able to not ask the coach for permission. They wanted to be able to say, I'm going to leave and I'm going to transfer and I'm going to go into the portal. And what it's done though is, and there's some things that we can change and make better in there, because I think we have to give them a little bit of time to really see, because I think one of the things that we found is that they go into the portal, they want to transfer to a certain institution, but not many of their credits transfer to that next institution. And so it may force them to backpedal and say, whoa, maybe I don't want to go that direction. And so we've got to do some tightening up on that a little bit. And I know they're working on that. I'm not on that committee anymore, but I think it was good, but it also allows us to hopefully keep us doing it the right way. So once they go into the portal, then you know you can contact that student athlete. And I think that's helpful. I know on each athletic staff around the country, they've got somebody that looks in that portal every day and says, here's who's in the portal. Do we want to recruit that student athlete?
Great, thank you. And our last comment from Rich Irvin. Rich?
Oh, thank you very much, Rick. I'm sure you didn't sign, when you signed up, you didn't expect this to happen, of taking us through these weird situations where what's right one day is not right the next day, and having to get ready for all sorts of different things. So you have to be ready to dance on your feet, on your light feet. So again, we really appreciate you not taking time with us today, but also what you're doing to keep things going. So what we're giving you here is that we are giving you, in your name, we're going to contribute 100 doses of vaccine to the Polio Plus Fund.
Awesome.
After 26 years of hard work, Rotary and its partners are on the eve of eradicating this tenacious disease, but a strong push is needed now to root it out once and for all. It is conceivable for polio to be eradicated in the next few years. It is a window of opportunity of historic proportions as we move forward with this polio endgame strategy. If we all have the fortitude to see this effort through to the end, then we will eradicate polio, says Bill Gates. And now you are part of that thing of eradicating the polio. So thank you so much for being here.
That's awesome. Great. Thank you.
Nicely said, Rich. Nicely said.
Yes.
And Mr. George, thank you so much for being with us today. And you know, we're rooting for you as you continue to tackle this situation. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me, and thanks for the questions. They were very well thought out. Thank you.